It's all well and good that technology is moving at a rapid pace, but in healthcare, none of that matters if you can't turn a brilliant, innovative idea into a tangible, accessible, and scalable product. Innovation is abundant, but the pathway from concept to delivery has often been a steep mountain to climb. Why is it that in an era that's brimming with technological advancements that we stumble when it comes time to execute? How can we empower those with the know-how to serve communities with bespoke health interventions, even if they don't know how to code? And what if the key to unlocking this potential lies not within the lines of code, but in assembling them like building blocks? With me today is Leon Young from Cogniss. And in this episode, we talk about how no-code platforms are conquering complex barriers of health solution development, how Australian tech startups can stride confidently onto the global stage, and avenues through which no-code infrastructure is democratising digital health, enabling professionals to create custom patient-facing solutions. Collaboration starts with a conversation, Team HealthTech. Let's make it happen.
Welcome to Talking HealthTech, featuring content and community about technology and healthcare. We acknowledge the traditional owners of lands these conversations were recorded and pay respect to elders past and present.
G'day, Leon. How you going?
Really good. Great to be here, Pete.
Yeah. Look, thanks for having me here in the office here for Cogniss in Australia. And I'm keen to learn about the work you're doing here as well. It's broad too. It's quite an interesting story. But maybe firstly, if you can introduce yourself and start to go into a little bit more about what Cogniss does.
Yeah, okay. So I'll keep the origin story as short as I can, but it is kind of like a lifetime journey. So it goes all the way back to when I was in high school as a kid with ADHD who perhaps didn't work very well in the traditional school system. I was lucky enough to be in a school that had a very early investment in computers, and I found that I could program and got into that. And I was really interested early on about the idea about how you make this accessible. So I got to do a school project where for 6 months I could concentrate on creating something. Yeah. And I chose to create a programming language for non-programmers called Fifth, which was, very simple and very basic, but it's interesting that sort of the arc of my life after that has been about empowering people to use technology who are non-technical people. In the 90s, I co-founded a company called No Code. The sad joke I'd make is that my company owned the trademark to the word no code around the world and all the domains, and sadly sold that with the business and the .com crash. So I wish we had that now. That was one of the first platforms that allowed non-technical people to build sophisticated web apps. And so that was a really good learning journey, and we built that platform 4 times. So we learned a lot over that period of time about how to do this and what actually worked for people. And after exiting that business, I didn't just want to start another software business. I wanted to do something that actually had some meaning for me personally, had some sort of social impact. And I ended up co-founding an agency here in Surrey Hills called 2 and 2. And 2 and 2 was a specialist at applying psychology to the design of digital solutions for behaviour change. So that was across education, health, culture, things like that, environmental issues, all kinds of things. But more and more as time went on, we found people coming to us, particularly researchers with interesting health interventions that they wanted to create. And often they were grant funded. So they had fixed budget, never enough, really, and ambitious goals. And what we realized was that the custom development agency model just didn't work for these people. It didn't really work for our government customers. We had a lot of government customers, and we worked with people like Headspace and some of their early products, because that custom development model, firstly, was so expensive, it was resource intensive. It would be really hard for the client and for us to start from nothing and go through to having a product. It would typically take a year. And then we'd see these products go out in market, and they'd win all the awards, and they'd have lots of people using them. And then 3 years later, there'd be a change of government, or funding ran out, and we'd see really great products get switched off. Things that were really helping people that got retired because they were too expensive to maintain them. So that idea was really, for the team here, we were just thinking about how do we change how we do this. And obviously for me, it was a bit of a collision of the two worlds. And so that senior team of that agency, who are still the senior people here, and I started working quite a long time ago on this idea of a product that would be as easy as Canva to use, but would allow you to build something completely on your own, a sophisticated health intervention, to be able to run studies, to be able to take it through to commercial scale at an affordable, fixed sort of ongoing cost. And we had a very unusual journey as a startup because we already had the customer base who kind of needed the product. And it was also at a time where, due to a change of government sort of filtering through, we're seeing budgets in our area, in the health area, getting cut. So that sort of forced us to jump into this because we couldn't do the things we were doing before. And we managed to bring those customers on that journey. So we had, some years of sort of going under the radar where we're working with paying customers, co-designing with them, building the thing that they wanted, co-designing with their end users to see how they were using the products. And it took a long time to get to that vision, which is something where we no longer have to offer any agency services. That is really, we can give it to a health professional with no IT understanding, no UX understanding, and we give them all the best-in-class UX, give them all of the technology they need to create these solutions. And we kind of got to that stage 3 years or so ago where we thought we were hitting mark with the product. Now we've got to think about how do we actually commercialize this and move out of this sort of R&D mode. And we did a small crowdfund in Australia. Everyone told us you can't do crowdfunds for B2B products. Well, we raised nearly $1 million from people, almost all people we didn't know, through an online campaign, basically people who got the vision of the potential this had to solve problems, particularly in health. And so we raised that money and used that to build out a customer success function, build an academy, all the things that we needed to actually take the product to scale. At that time, we were always thinking about this has to be global, as I've seen you touch on as well in other podcasts. There's no, in Australia, you can't sustainably make a product, generally a sophisticated product, and concentrate on the local market. You have to be thinking global from day one. So we took the product into the UK, and it all happened a bit faster than we expected. So the New South Wales government was running, Investment New South Wales were running one of their health tech missions a couple of years ago to London Tech Week, and the UK government, what is now DBT, their department there, invited us on another trade mission at the same time. And my chief commercial officer and I decided, we already had it in the mind that the UK was the place where we thought we wanted to launch globally. And we thought, if we're going to do this, we don't want to go on a trade mission for 2 weeks and come back with some business cards. So we stayed in market for most of the second half of that year. The thesis that it was the place to launch from was true. Yeah. So we ended up re-domiciling to the UK. Our headquarters is now in Cambridge. That's the commercial centre of gravity for us. But the room we're sitting in next to Central Station is still the heart of the product design and development and etc.
I mean, that ticks a lot of boxes, doesn't it, in terms of, even right back at the start of that origin journey that you talked about, how, there's the collision of those interests and the background and the experience, and maybe a few iterations along the way, perhaps a few macro environmental issues around funding and everything that kind of take you down a particular pathway. But you had the kind of groundswell in terms of user base. It's kind of like, well, what do we do with this thing? Raising capital in interesting and innovative ways, and then looking at, globally for the market, then where's the best place to place these things, and then to, just really immerse yourself in that environment is really important. So, and actually to this point too, around no code, I want to come to that in a bit more detail, because, in a healthcare environment where there's a lot of examples where, a healthcare intervention, technology is going to play a really important role, but, technology is expensive to implement, but as you rightly put too, very expensive to maintain as well. And sometimes that's not fully kind of appreciated. Even by putting together a really fancy website, you forget that there's all this kind of ongoing kind of stuff that you need to do. So talk me through a little bit more about, this no-code concept and how that might apply in different areas of healthcare. Like, does it need to be a very large healthcare institution, a hospital, or it's like right down to any type of healthcare?
It's really at any scale, and that was really part of the dream, is that we wanted to be able to solve that. So the way we look at the market for health tech at the moment, our position is that we're still very, very early in this. So particularly in the UK, you'll hear people talk about the market being mature because there are proven products that have been out for a few years and in use and they're great. But generally, those proven products are sitting at the top of the pyramid. So if you think about all of the health issues that digital can assist with, we're really excited about the niche issues, about those underserved communities, rare diseases, all the things that are very hard for health systems to deal with. At the moment, you've kind of got this pyramid where at the top you've got traditional software development, and what we hear in the UK is typically people will spend £500,000 just to get the first version of their product released, and then you're going to spend 50% of that at least a year to maintain it. In Australia, you might do that for the same in Australian dollars. You might do it a bit cheaper, but the reason the price is so high in the UK is that most people there realise what they're going to have to do in terms of their product being compliant to go into health systems and all of those sorts of things. You've got to be investing in that right from the beginning. So it is a really expensive thing, and as a result of that, you've seen companies like SilverCloud who have got generic solutions for anxiety and depression and things like that, and they grew hugely in the pandemic, licensing that into health systems around the world. But then what about all of the niche things sitting underneath that? If you just look at mental health, think about severe enduring mental health, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, all of these things that you're never going to get the millions of dollars to build the product for, but at the same time, they're the thing that the health system has the hardest time coping with because they require very specialised, expensive expertise, and that expertise doesn't scale. And so it's at that sort of next section down on the pyramid where we think health experts can be creating products, and we have people who are creating products for 50 end users sometimes, and then other ones that are 100,000. So being able to serve that audience of 50 people in your local health district where you don't have a clinician or don't have a nurse who can provide that, that's really valuable. So in the no-code space, what we have seen is some really great companies, particularly in Europe, who are dealing with what we'd call the very lowest level of the pyramid. And this is for, again, more mass market solutions, but where customers, being health systems or life science companies or whatever, really want an almost finished product that they can change a bit of content and things like that. So you'll see people like IllumiView and Kasana you might have heard of, and they will pretty much create their own digital therapeutic and then give you a content management system so you can change it a bit. And so those products are really great, I think, for people who don't have much time, don't have much resource, and you need to get something out really quick. So you've got that at the bottom, you've got that custom development at the top, but it's all the bit in the middle that really excites us, where there aren't the off-the-shelf things, where people, if they're going to invest in this, want to own the intellectual property. They want to own the product they create. They don't want to be customizing someone else's. That's what we're really concentrating on. At the moment, most of our customers are still probably serving those big picture things, and they're using our product because it's, cheaper, better, faster, we would say. But the exciting thing for us is as customers start to pick it up, people in their organization go, oh, wow, we could use this, and in a week we could make a solution for this particular problem and push it out to those people.
Yeah, well, that's interesting in itself because, from my own experience in engaging with healthcare providers, and perhaps if you're using a practice management system or existing software solutions within the clinic, that's important to have, and that might be, where all the patient information is. But I guess when there's a need for, patient portals or quite, bespoke workflows or things, often the first thought is, well, wouldn't it be great if our practice management system did this, or maybe we just build something ourselves that kind of meets a particular use case? So are you saying that for those that are not fully familiar with where that no-code thing fits in, I think what your explanation just helped, but is it like taking existing solutions and then just white labeling it and allowing you to kind of tweak it, or what does that look like? So
for our customers, it's creating new and novel health solutions. That's primarily what it is. We have customers who are also creating apps to run randomized control trials, micro-randomized trials, things like that, adherence apps for medications and that sort of thing. But it's more true digital health interventions for the patient. So it sits really outside of that world of administration and what happens in the health system. So we're always very clear to people when we're talking about this. We're not about solving your problem about how you're going to move patients around in the hospital or anything like that. We're about the patient maybe before they come to hospital or after they've been, after they've been diagnosed, for example. How you're going to provide them support, how you're actually going to deliver behavioural interventions, track things that they may be doing at home. The big thing that you hear in the UK, and I'm sure we'll start to hear it more here, is about the virtual ward. So the idea of keeping people out of the health system and giving them the technology to stay in the home. That's great. You can put those devices in and, the doctor or the nurse back at HQ can see those numbers and jump on a video conference. But how do you actually control the health behaviours or drive those behaviours for the individual or for their family and supporting them? It's those types of things that people are building on our solution.
Yeah, actually. And in this current environment, there's, big emphasis on patient outcomes and being, centered, care that's centered around the patient. So having a good user experience from a patient that does integrate back into the broader health system is increasingly important, not just from a service point of view, but increasingly a lot of funding for clinics as well is coming in. So there's a lot of financial implications too in ensuring a good quality service to patients and hopefully then tracking through the impact that's being caused as well too, right?
I think that's a key thing. And the tracking is so important. Because our early successes in Australia were very much in the research sector. We had some existing corporate customers, but the solution sort of caught fire word of mouth amongst researchers who had bad experiences with getting a grant and then trying to build a product on the cheap, often built by a student or something like that, and then they realise the problems with that. And that has carried forward into the UK, where our first customers there are the big universities. And those people not only want to create new and innovative health solutions, obviously they want to publish papers around it. So we built a lot of functionality around RCTs and MRTs and all of that sort of thing. But being able to see that data live, being able to see at an individual patient level, be able to look at different cohorts and different, socio or psychodemographic units and see how those people are interacting with your solution, really, really important.
Yeah. You mentioned that there are some users that might only have 50 patients within their demographic because that's the really target audience they have. But you mentioned some have hundreds of thousands. In my work in incubators, accelerators, or working with early stage startups, one thing you say is that you've got to build your prototype to be able to then demonstrate and build an MVP, and perhaps a no-code solution would be a good fit there. But does that mean then that a no-code solution is also just as robust and viable as a standalone product ongoing?
I have to put the salesman hat on at that point because ours is. That's what we're about. And there's a lot of confusion when people hear no-code, because in the startup scene you hear a lot about the generalist no-code products like Bubble and Webflow and things like that, which are a very, very different class of product on many levels. Firstly, even as a software engineer, like when I first sat down with Bubble, it's quite a learning curve. And you have to get your own database, you have to join it up, you have to do all these. It's just replacing coding with visual metaphors. So firstly, we're not doing that. We're giving you the components you would want in a health app with the user experience already designed. You're configuring, picking and choosing, creating the product. But then the second thing is that you have to produce a product that is secure, that is compliant, that you can roll out in any market that you want to, that you can get your DGAT for if you want to roll it out in Germany, or your SOC 2 and your high health in the US. So what we've done is from day one with AWS, we've had a very tight working relationship. And our sort of aim is to be the layer that sits above their services that makes their services accessible. So we've worked together to make sure that we have all of these back-end components in place. But then also we have products in our ecosystem that support our customers through getting their ISO 27001 certification, generating all their policies, managing their policies, doing their, high health or whatever they need to do. And that is the thing that I think that's probably the most common mistake I see at a startup level. Generalist startup mantra seeping into health. Okay, so there's a lot of things, as everyone watching this hopefully knows, that are different about health. First, you can't move fast and break things. When you're dealing with someone's health, you just can't do that. But secondly, you've got to have all of those security and privacy things taken care of from day one. You've got to know how you're going to do that, how you're going to manage consents for clinicians to see your data, and how you give the patient control over that, and the ability to see who can see it, and the ability to revoke that when they don't want that, the ability if they want to share data with another product, and to put them in control of that. And we see so many people who have raised their seed funding, they've built something, and it looks good, but they can't sell it to a health system. They can't sell it to a life sciences company, and they've got to start again from scratch. So we're making sure that all of those pieces on the road are taken care of for them, and that we can do the scale, so we can deploy anywhere in the world. And if they have hundreds of thousands or theoretically millions of users, it's going to work. And our vision is, to be honest, if you just want to build an MVP on our product and then go and rebuild it, our business model isn't about that anyway. So we're not very interested in that. We'll give you a free trial, and we have an innovator plan for $85 a month. But we test with you first what you want to do, whether it fits our platform, and then we want to be your partner all the way through the life cycle of that product. And to date, we've had no one leave the platform and rebuild, so we feel like we're getting that right.
Yeah. Well, I guess, coming from your own experience too, for the business in establishing in Australia, and then, looking to other parts of the world, bringing your own experiences globally, and I guess, for want of a better term, productizing the process of those regulatory elements, or at least making bridging those gaps a little bit easier, and hopefully reducing the surprises or hurdles that these groups might undertake. Particularly you've focused on the UK in terms of setting up there, and I imagine I know there are a lot of health tech organisations, particularly in Australia, that are interested in moving into the UK. How have you found that process in terms of establishing and then building the business and moving into the UK and the NHS and everything there? What advice would you give for those that are looking to also go to the UK?
Yeah, well, if I'll just take that a little bit wider, in that in sort of previous professional lives, I've been involved, and one of our directors has also been involved in taking Australian SaaS products, like the no-code product I talked about before. I took that into the US, taking products into Asia and taking products into the UK. And so even before you get to the special needs of a health tech business, I would say for Australian companies wanting to go global, really think about the UK, because the culture is so similar, the way people do business is so similar, it's geographically compact. If you're going to try and launch something in the US that you're selling B2B, you'll be on a plane every single day. So you need deep pockets to fund that, and I've done it, it's not fun. And American business culture is very different in terms of knowing when you've really got a sale and things like this. And you talk to anyone who's been through that process, things are much more straightforward in the UK, and the governance and all that sort of stuff is very, very similar. So there's really good reasons, I think, for any tech business to think about the UK. Plus, the only good thing that I think's come out of Brexit for the UK is that because they're not part of Europe now, the UK government is really focused on attracting Australian companies and supporting you in going global. And that's how they've seen it with us. Like, we're already in their guidebook on taking UK companies global, just since re-domiciling, because of the way that we've worked with them. So there's all those things. And then the health tech scene is super networked. That first trip that Joe, our Chief Commercial Officer, and I did, we were amazed at how quickly we just got introduced around, how quickly we met people, the level of trust that was there, and we really knew who's who in the zoo very quickly, and everyone talks to each other. So there's been this incredible experience where the last time I was there, every time I was meeting people, they'd already heard of our product several times, which doesn't even happen in Australia yet, because these people are so networked with each other. And so that accelerates your ability to do things, to put in partnership programs, to work out how to navigate the system. The other two advantages, I think, if you're going to look at the NHS, is one, while health systems everywhere in the world are arguably in crisis, similar, around increasing cost of procedures, not enough people, not enough money. Sadly for the UK, having, arguably historically the greatest health system in the world, they're going through a really tough time at the moment. So if you've got solutions to that, they're going to be open to it, because they don't have the money to employ new people, etc. So if you can be more cost effective, that's great. And then secondly, they have the mechanisms around the NHS. So, and this is what I'm, I think I've mentioned this to you before and lots of people in the network in Australia that I'm trying to see how we make this happen. But in the UK, the NHS England is divided up into what they call ICBs, integrated care boards, and then NHS trusts underneath that, which is the equivalent of a local health authority or something of that nature. That's where the money gets spent, either at the ICB or the local health authority level, generally not NHS England. So you have to work out how to get in there in the same way that you have to get into local authorities here. But the difference is that the government has invested in creating mechanisms to do that. So there's what they used to call the AHSN network. It's now the Health Innovation Network, and they're around England, and they provide an interface between industry and the NHS. And they also focus on driving innovation within the NHS. So for us, those partnerships are really important because we actually want the people inside the system to be innovating on our platform. So putting together partnerships with those organisations has been great. We have a very close partnership with Health Innovation East. That's the east of England and around Cambridge where our office is. And the great thing to be aware of for Australian companies there is that they're actually also really focused on bringing overseas companies into the UK. And so they will support health tech companies in making that transition if you want to come and do it in the east of England. And to anyone in Australia watching, feel free to reach out to me. We can provide lots of introductions. Always very happy to do that. But what we found is just in that process is that we've now established a bit of a two-way network because we've introduced people in both directions so much. We're now seeing more and more crossover and working with Australian startups who are on our platform now about how they license in to the UK and creating more of that true ecosystem.
Do you find that by partnering with those, the key bodies, like you say, the health information networks in the UK and the building up the customer base in other countries, then provides that credibility back in Australia, and not even just back to the health tech startups, but I think also having support from the broader ecosystem is really important too, in terms of the institution bodies like the AIDH and the digital agency and things like this. By having support of the broader kind of ecosystem too, that's going to be really important. I think even without, yes, it's important having the established presence in Australia, but by being able to demonstrate in other parts of the world, that's got to provide, credibility and confidence back.
Look, it absolutely does. And it was, it was quite interesting for us when we first started doing a bit of publicity about the partnerships and things in the UK. The calls we were receiving from people in Australian government departments and things like that, where it was hard to get through the front door before, perhaps. No disrespect to them, but there's always this problem about how you navigate and find the right person and tell them what you're doing. And when they suddenly see that you're doing things overseas that they would like to do here, it opens up those sorts of doors now. And, things like with the ADHA at the moment, they do great work around consumer engagement and understanding consumer issues around how digital health is consumed and how it could be better. And they run a 6-monthly workshop around that. So with their workshop this time, we're doing a kind of hackathon where we're building an app live over one day. We've already done a bit of consultation with some of their consumers about common health issues for newly diagnosed patients. And so we're actually going to do a live build of a small app for people with colorectal bowel cancer who are newly diagnosed, and setting up pathways and doing that one day environment, just as a way of opening people's minds to what actually can be done with very limited resources. And that model, we did that, the first time we did that was with the World Health Organization at their Digital Health Summit in Porto. So again, someone from ADHA was in Porto for that, saw us doing that there and said, why aren't we doing this in Australia? So,
and I think sometimes too, it's about solving the right problem at the right time and being and communicating that effectively. And so it's sometimes you can have the best solutions, but if the right people at the right time don't know about it, then unfortunately those can fall through. So that is good timing. And so bringing things back then to the no-code solutions and thinking about whether it be healthcare startups or even clinicians with patients within their own groups looking to engage patients more, who are the right types of people to engage with you at a particular, and what time in the process? And like, what's that process for you in terms of next steps and understanding the problem and early stage?
There's a couple of different ways that evolves. So for people who don't already have the platform, we're normally engaging with them at the point that they already have a burning problem. They know they've got the problem, they know they've got to solve it, they probably don't have the resources to solve it the traditional way, or even if they do, they know that that's going to be fraught and difficult. When we meet those people, which is usually coming to the website or being introduced in by one of the health innovation networks or something like that, we just concentrate on getting them onto the platform as quickly as possible and understanding whether it's right for them and building something. So literally the process is they will fill in a little briefing form. A customer success person picks that up here. That's a one-pager. They jump on a screen share with them and get them started on doing what they're doing, let them have a play with it, and then we come back and support them as needed through that process. Now, what tends to happen, I'll give you an example of what will sound like an unusual customer, but it is a health customer, which is Lend-Lease. So you don't think of that immediately, but Lend-Lease, proud Australian company, one of the biggest construction companies in the world. At any one time, they have about 100,000 people around the world working on construction sites. They're very, very committed to health and safety in the construction environment, and they see that both in the traditional health and safety lens, which is that people get injured and die on work sites, and you have to reduce that as much as you can, but also understanding that it's an industry where a very high proportion of people working in this industry are living with trauma because they have typically either come out of armed services or police or ex-offenders who have come out of the prison system. And they're coming into an industry that doesn't necessarily know or isn't skilled in how to support that. And so they initially used our product to build a kind of health and safety passport where people did the usual training and compliance, and so their contractors could turn up on a site and go, here's my badges on my phone, and they'd let them on the site. They've now gone on to build 30-something apps around things like mental safety and how to better support these people and get better general outcomes for them. And that's an example where they have, literally do have things down to 50 people and then things sort of for the full user base. And that's just happened from them creating one thing and then going, this is pretty easy. And we have this super app model. So when they create 30 apps, it's not 30 apps in the App Store. There's the Lend-Lease app in the App Store. And then they can push out different apps to different people depending what's appropriate for them inside that model. And just as a side thing, that's how we're seeing ourselves, things moving forward in health systems where they can have one app and clinicians can prescribe inside that app different health interventions. But, that's a perfect example of them seeing that and then just picking it up to solve all of these other problems that they had that previously they just didn't know how to tackle because they couldn't go and spend $500,000 on each one of these things, right? And we're starting to see that with the more traditional health customers. I mean, on average, it's early days for us. On average, people built 2 apps, but we're seeing that multiple so that they come in with the initial problem, but then once they understand it and once other people in the organization see it, then it's about how do we get more people on there. And so in regards to that, we do a lot around bootcamp programs, supporting accelerators, even if they're internal, and innovation programs. So sometimes, an organization might look at this and say it has great potential, but if people across the organization don't know how to use this, they don't know that it's there, that doesn't have much value. So we'll do things where we run a boot camp over a period of time where they will pick people who care about those problems, bring them into teams and take them through that process. And so that's happening in organizations. We're also doing it in universities in the UK. That's been really popular, and with accelerators, so like the West Midlands Health Tech Accelerator, we're doing similar things with Health Innovation East, where they're setting up a sandbox so that anyone in any of the ICBs in their area who identifies an issue can jump into their Cogniss sandbox and play around for free and see if they can build a solution to that problem.
I'm still thinking about the Lend-Lease solution, because that's a great demonstration of, I guess, the increasing burden of responsibility that employers have in Australia, something that we see in other healthcare systems around the world, particularly in the US, around the role that employers play in looking after the health of their employees. But in Australia, there's a strong duty of care that employers know that they have, and that they provide those services through the typical means, by EAPs or by assistance programs and things. And that's important, and they're effective, but potentially are underutilized, or there's different ways to address it. And, a construction company's probably, it's not the best investment of their time and effort to then have a software development capability internally, but at the same time, you need a solution that's robust and flexible to be able to do that. So it certainly broadens the scope, but it is, good to see that there's such a strong focus on the healthcare side. I reflect as well on some of the comments you made too about, always open to helping innovators understand different landscapes. And it sounds like there's much more that you do than, a bunch of coders sitting in the dark and writing stuff. And there's a lot of the consultative approach. So the types of innovation, I'd love to understand or just crystallize, the types of innovations that Cogniss is providing to be able to, help this digital health ecosystem in this really exciting time. How do you describe the work that you do there?
Yeah, it's simultaneously broad and narrow. What I mean by that is that we can't guess how people are going to use the platform. And it's very focused on health, and it's very focused on behaviour. That's really our secret sauce, is that knowledge of applied psych, and how you get someone to do the thing that they know they should do, but they probably won't do without the right prompts, etc. So we give people all the tools to do that. And, it's amazing to see the range of products that people are building on it. For us, the really hot areas at the moment are children and women's health. And it's interesting that NHS England has identified women's health as the biggest single issue that they have, not serving that correctly. And I encourage anyone who hasn't seen it to go back and look at the first, what's the name of the camp? The Curiosity Camp, the first Curiosity Camp podcast that you did, Pete. I encourage anyone watching who hasn't seen it to go back and watch the first of your podcasts around the Curiosity Camp. Yeah. There's a very good discussion on there about the bias in health systems and in research and what that has meant. And it's more than just entrenched sexism. It's to do with the structure of how health has been delivered, that we've ended up with all of these women's health issues not being addressed in the way that other general health issues are. So it's not surprising that we're seeing from the top end of town, from big pharmaceutical companies through to little startups, all concentrating on women's health at the moment and concentrating on children's product. But to give you an idea of the range of things people build, in Australia there's 6 government health interventions built on Cogniss, 2 funded by Federal Health. One is called Raising Healthy Minds, which is a product that's for parents to provide you just-in-time support with the healthy upbringing of your children. So it's personalised, where you put in information about your family, it builds information up over time. And then if you notice something with your child, a behaviour or something like that, you can type it in and it will triage you to the most appropriate content, check in to see if that worked, and push out messages to you based on developmental stages and that type of thing. And that's been a very successful product. Believe it or not, and you probably will believe it, there's 4 different products, 2 built by or owned by Victorian government, 2 by New South Wales government, all completely different products about addressing gambling addiction. And, for those who don't know, Australia has not only the highest rate of problem gambling in the world, but twice as high as the next highest nation. Really? So huge social cost. And so those sorts of mental health support programs have been really big. But then, things around, in the femtech space, endometriosis, perimenopause apps, all kinds of very broad.
Really important issues to address, and that's some great examples of the use cases that have been built on the platform, let's say. But then, a lot of stuff has happened. You mentioned you're just kind of scratching the surface in Australia. What can we look forward to seeing from Cogniss over the next 6, 12, 24 months?
Yeah, well, for everyone in this space, the big, hairy, audacious goal is about how we can use machine learning, isn't it? To how we can use that for prescient diagnosis and for avoiding health issues in the first place. And it's something we've been thinking about since we started this product, and thinking about not only how you deliver that, but what are the risks, and the risks are immense. Right. There's been a lot of thought going into this from our point of view about where the rails need to be, how we can start to make use of this new technology in a way that is safe for delivering health interventions. The really exciting project for me at the moment, or customer, is Brain and Mind Centre at Sydney University, who are one of the first people to ever use the platform. The current product they're building on there is a product for I think teens and young adults, focused on identifying risk of mental health incidents before they occur. And so they're using a Cogniss app. In the first instance, they're tracking all of the passive data points off Apple Health Kit. So not the 2 or 3 things people normally have, but almost the full set in there, which is a huge amount of data, as well as whatever data is input, and then taking that out into a machine learning model that they're building at the moment to try and predict these events. But then we have to think about, well, what do we do with that? So they can feed that back into Cogniss, and Cogniss's rules-based AI can then go, okay, this person is at risk of psychosis or something, deliver an intervention. Huge risk around that, though, and thinking about how to do that safely. And we have social networking functions in our platform, so you can create apps that aren't just for the person living with the condition, but are for their family or their clinician or whoever, and they have different experiences and they link them all together in that process. So I think there'll be a lot of thought about how you mitigate risk around these things by involving the family or the carer, rather than necessarily always sending a message directly to the person. But this is something that we've been engaged with here with the authorities and in the UK. A lot of conversation around it. And again, people who are interested in this, I would love them to drop me an email and say hello, because I think as an industry, we need to get on the front foot about this. We need to take responsibility for understanding where the risks are, how we're going to use this technology safely, and we need to take that to government. Because if we don't, government is going to be reactive. Firstly, we still have for all the regulation that we have, it's still a cowboy market in terms of what people are able to get into the App Store as consumer products. Very risky, and there will be some adverse events coming out of that. We don't want there to be adverse events and then knee-jerk legislation that blocks our ability to do the really good stuff that we can do. And so that's what I really care about, and that's the big thing that I'm thinking about, is how to bridge the possibilities with actually doing this in a safe way.
Yeah. Look, mate, you're hitting all the really important topics head on. There's a lot of hurdles to navigate to do things in the right way, in a safe way, as you suggest, and working with those regulators, working with the guardrails to do things appropriately and weed out the cowboy solutions and really have an impact on patients. So, Leon, I'll put the details for Cogniss in the show notes of this episode. It's been great to have a chat on the show and look forward to checking in at some point in the future. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Pete. That was an absolute pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Talking Health Tech. Make sure you like and subscribe and share this episode with someone who might find it valuable. For more information and resources about healthcare innovation, visit talkinghealthtech.com.